Destiny launched in 2014, Destiny 2 followed in 2017, and in 2023, Lightfall, or as I like to call it, Destiny 3.
Yeah, I said it!
Now, Lightfall isn't just another formulaic expansion, it's the culmination of a decade's worth of development. Bungie has crammed more groundbreaking content into Lightfall than any other expansion to date. Now strap in, cause here's just a sample of what Lightfall has to offer. Ready? Let's go. Of course we're getting new exotic armor and new exotic weapons to add to our collection. A crazy new darkness subclass called Strand. An entirely new gameplay mechanic grapple hook that literally changes everything. A huge neon lit city to explore on Neptune, which is a brand new destination. A massive new raid, yeah, it's time to confront another ancient threat. The introduction of Guardian ranks. A much needed loadout system. A very helpful new mod manager. Not to mention the most quality of life improvements of any Destiny expansion ever. And Bungie finally delivers on its promise of an epic balls out battle between good and evil. And for the first time in a decade, the Traveler actually does something. Look, it's moving. And look here, it's firing a freaking laser beam. So yeah, whether you're a hardcore Destiny veteran, a casual fan that occasionally dips into the game, or you're simply curious about Bungie's next big release, this, my friend, is the video for you. So yeah, here's everything you need to know about Lightfall. Grapple hook. Let's start with Lightfall's biggest new addition, the grapple hook. Make no mistake, this changes everything. The way you move and fight, the way you interact with enemies, vehicles, other guardians, the entire environment. It's a legit game changer. Just check out what this thing can do. If you need to give your legs a rest, grapple onto a passing sparrow. Fancy a shortcut through Neomuna, then hitch a ride on a Cabal ship and enjoy the sights. Or spice up old strikes by catching a train. You can even grapple onto your fellow guardian mid-super, trailing them like a green shooting star. It's utterly glorious. And that's not all. You see, this is a tangle. It's basically a strand orb. So how do you actually get tangles? Well, you create them by killing enemies that have been debuffed with Strand. As you can see, this enemy has spawned a tangle, and you can do 3 things with these glowing green orbs. So yeah, shooting a tangle makes it explode, causing damage to nearby enemies. You can also pick up a tangle and throw it, again causing a lovely little Strand explosion. Or you can pick it up, throw it, then grapple onto it mid-air for a tasty little speed boost. You can even grapple while holding a tangle, allowing you to dunk on enemies from above. The point is, you can grapple onto anything, even thin air, yet you don't actually need a surface to latch onto. Total freedom of movement. And check it out, the eyes on Callus's ship follow you wherever you go. Creepy. But grappling isn't just a cool new way to get around, it's also an essential combat tool. You can kick some serious ass with this thing. You can now execute brutal grapple melee strikes. Now, these particular melee strikes deal bonus damage and inflict a debuff called Unravel. Now, killing an unraveled enemy will cause strand threads to burst out of them and attack other nearby targets. So yeah, it's a really aggressive attack that gets you straight into the heart of the battle and allows you to pull off some really creative Strand shenanigans. The Sparrow Grapple melee combo is a particular favorite of mine. You can also perform a grapple finisher. Now, if you have one of the new Strand fragments equipped, Thread of Finality, finishers actually generate threadlings, which are explosive minions that seek out nearby targets. You can see them here crawling along the floor towards the enemy. Now, it's worth noting that you'll only be able to use the grapple hook if you have Strand equipped as your subclass, so let's have an in-depth look at Strand. Strand. I love Strand. Strand, the new dark power that Guardians can wield to devastating effect. And yes, it's as crazy as you'd hope it to be. As we've just seen, the brand new grapple hook is a whole new gameplay mechanic in itself. But Strand also throws in new supers, melees, and abilities, so let's have a look at them. Let's start with the Hunter's Thread Runner. Now, the Hunter's super is called Silk Strike. You get to swing a rope dart. Now, the heavy attack performs a devastating 360 beatdown, wiping out all nearby enemies no matter where they stand. So yeah, if you find yourself surrounded, break out the Silk Strike. Now, the light attack is ideal for single opponents, and if you're skilled enough to hit an enemy with the tip of the dart, you deal bonus damage. Now, both light and heavy attack can be used on the ground or in the air, and hunters are also able to use grapple more often during their super. Now, the hunter's melee is called Threaded Spike. You throw a dart that damages multiple enemies before returning. The more enemies you hit, the more melee energy you get back. Now, get this, if you catch the dart when it returns by pressing the melee button at just the right time, you gain bonus melee energy. And as you'd expect, practice makes perfect, so keep throwing those darts and keep catching them. The hunter also has 2 new Strand aspects. The first one is called Ensnaring Slam. While While in the air, you can perform a ground pound that suspends all enemies caught in its blast. Suspended enemies are basically helpless like flies caught in a web. And as you'd expect, you can combine ensnaring slam with a grapple hook to pull off some rather nice looking takedowns. The Hunter's second aspect is called Widow's Silk. It allows you to grapple more often and create grapple points that your fire team can also use. Next up, the Titan's Berserker. Now, the Titan Strand super is called Blade Fury. Unsurprisingly, you delete enemies with your fists, or in this case, your Strand Claws. Now, stringing together hits with a light attack increases its speed, but it also builds up energy for the heavy attack. Now, the heavy attack allows you to hurl forth a pair of Strand projectiles that seek out enemies, damaging them and suspending them. So yeah, light attacks for close range, heavy attacks for long range, but essentially, you're punching stuff in the face, and that's just fine by me. The Titan's melee is Frenzied Blade. You dash forward and, well, punch stuff. You have 3 melee charges which you can string together. Enemies hit with this melee will deal less damage. Right then, remember this? That's right, it's a tangle. Well, one of the Titan's aspects, called Into the Fray, does something cool when you destroy one of these. So yeah, destroying a tangle gives you and nearby allies a green Strand shield. This reduces the damage you take and increases your melee regen. Nice. The Titan's second aspect is Drenger's Lash. When you cast your barricade, it sends out a Strand shockwave that suspends targets caught in its path. Next up, the Warlock's Brood Weaver. Now, the Warlock Strand super is Needle Storm. You get to launch a ton of Strand missiles that explode into an army of Threadlings which hunt down any survivors. Yeah, these Threadlings will scuttle forward, seek out enemies and explode. But get this, only the Warlock's Threadlings will return to you if they can't find a target. Instead, they run back and perch on you until you attack another enemy. So yeah, this super is deadly at pretty much any range, and as long as you're pointing in the right direction, destruction is guaranteed. Now, the Warlock Strand melee is called Arcane Needle. You throw a deadly projectile that tracks your enemy, causes massive damage and debuffs them. And you can quickly chain 3 of these deadly needles in a row. Yeah, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, good night. Now, the Warlock also has 2 aspects. This one's called Weaver's Call. When you cast a rift, you unleash a small army of Threadlings. Now, if you have any pushed Threadlings, they too will join in when you cast your rift. You're basically the king of Threadlings, you weirdo. Now, the second aspect is called Mind Spun Invocation, and this aspect grants the Warlock some pretty cool buffs. For example, you can consume a Strand Grenade to gain a buff that causes targets to explode and suspend nearby enemies, and this allows you to then pull off all your other cool Warlock moves. So yeah, we've seen each class's unique Strand powers, but they also have cool abilities that they can all use. Let's have a look at them. Of course, all classes can use the new grapple hook, and all classes also have access to 2 new Strand Grenades. The Shackle Grenade explodes and suspends any enemies within its blast radius, and the Threadling Grenade generates 3 Threadlings that track down enemies. All classes can also use a fragment called Thread of Finality. Finishers generate Threadlings. Now, it's worth noting that all classes will have many different fragments to add to their build. This is just one example. Lightfall exotics. Right, it's now time to look at all of Lightfall's tasty exotics. Let's start with the exotic Hunter helmet, Critarachne's Facade. So yeah, as soon as you perform a grapple, you gain a Strand shield and flinch resistance. So you strengthen your defenses and make it harder for enemies to put you off your shot. Next up, the Warlock's exotic leg armor, Swarmers. So then, destroying a tangle will create Threadlings that track down and take out enemies. Next up, the Titan exotic leg armor, Abeyant Leap. When you cast your barricade, you send out 3 Strand shockwaves that suspend any enemies in its path. You also gain a Strand shield that protects you from incoming damage. Next up, the exotic stasis glaive, Winter Bite. Now, this weapon sits in your heavy slot and fires a large ball of stasis that locks onto nearby enemies and freezes them. You can then shatter them with a cheeky glaive melee. Now, say hello to the new exotic Strand sidearm, Final Warning. This sits in your kinetic slot. Now, when you hold down the trigger, you can mark targets and load up a volley of heat-seeking bullets, which you can then unleash upon your foes. So yeah, Final Warning is our first Strand exotic. Enjoy! Next up, we have the exotic heavy machine gun, Deterministic Chaos. Now, while holding the trigger, every 4th bullet weakens enemies and every 16th bullet makes enemies volatile. And we all know what happens to volatile enemies when they're shot. They go boom. And finally, Destiny's first ever exotic stasis bow, Vergless Curve. If you want to freeze your enemies in style, this is the weapon for you. So yeah, you know the drill. Become a lean green killing machine and save the universe. See you on Neptune. Peace.
At last. My semblance matches my inner